Well, we've got Becky Arbic on with us today. Thank you so much for making time to come and share a little bit of your experience, your take on teaching both the geometry and construction and AMPED curriculums, which I'm excited to talk a little bit about. But I think maybe to kick things off, could you just give us a little bit of a window into your sort of teaching career as a whole? Yeah, I don't know exactly, like if you spent time teaching math
Yeah,
curriculums prior to starting these programs, and yeah, just give us a little bit of
yeah,
a window into your background and your experience of teaching up to this point.
yeah. When I first started teaching, I was hired to be a basketball coach. I did not have a math degree, but I was pretty good at basketball. And after 1 year, my principal said, "We need you to be a math teacher if you want to keep your job." And I did because I had a husband and a kid, and another kid on the way. And so I got my math degree, and I hated every second of it because math's not easy for me. I never got it, and I didn't feel good about it. But I managed to get my math degree. And then I've taught middle school math for 6 years. And then I moved to the school that I'm at now at Surrey High School in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And I was teaching primary algebra 1 and geometry. And like I could see my kids not enjoying it, and I was
Yeah,
trying to like throw in the pizzazz and make it exciting, but it was still algebra 1 and geometry, like memorizing stuff, and nobody was jamming with it. And then in 2016, I actually ran into one of my husband's old college teammates on the beach in the UP. And he's like, I just went to this best training ever. You have to check it out. And the next day, my principal called me and was like, I heard about this training. You should check out. Um, so I did. And I drank the Kool Aid. And it was just really this type of teaching. One, it resonated with me because I'm not a sit still kind of person. I'm a 12-year-old boy trapped in a grown up adult's body. Like I think farts are funny, you know, all of
yeah,
all of that. Um, and just to be able to see the relevance of math and share that with my students was so powerful for me because I was the kid who, spent her geometry class holding her breath because this was stupid and had nothing to do with my life. And to be able to share that with my students and be like, no, like check out this awesome stuff we can do. I got super excited about it. And passion and excitement is contagious. And it's been fabulous for my students. So I've taught, this is my ninth year teaching geometry and construction and my fourth year teaching AMPed. And I still have students that are like, are we going to use this? Like, yeah, wait till next hour.
yeah.
Because it's
It's
awesome.
coming right up.
Yep. Yeah, so that's kind of my background on my math journey, and I would never go back to teaching like regular math. Actually,
Yeah,
I'm teaching a writer this year, so I have a 1 hour standalone algebra class, and I told my principal I'm using my amped materials for this. Like I'll make it work for this. I'll tweak the activities, but I'm not going to torture these kids with traditional math. Um, and I just the other day, yesterday, a student's like, I've never understood this stuff until now. Like those were his exact words. And I was like,
wow,
sweet, done for the day. All
mission
right.
accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's cool to hear those, the kids saying stuff like, I've never thought about it like this. This makes way more sense.
yeah, absolutely. And that you touched on this a little bit already, but could you kind of expand a little bit more on what you see as some of the main differences, either for you as the teacher. Well, we'll start there. For you as the teacher, what are some of the main differences of teaching either of these two contextualized curriculums as opposed to having to teach traditional math curriculums?
I like this because I get to use my problem solving brain and I get to use my creativity brain where, gosh, I had taught traditional algebra for 6 years. And it could be like you could have filmed me on year 3 and I would still be saying the same things on year 6.
Hmm.
It was just there was no excitement in that. And I mean, we're constantly switching up the projects we do, which constantly means we have different problems to solve. We're applying the math in different ways. We're always going back to like the tried and true stuff, the stuff that I know really makes the biggest impact for the kids. But for me as a teacher, I get to keep it fresh. And that's, I've been doing this 22 years and I don't want to be bored in my job, you
Yeah,
know?
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. Yep.
And then from the student perspective, I mean, you said you've taught. This is your ninth year, you said, teaching, or
Yep.
yeah. So you've got
Yep.
almost a decade of classroom experience, and things have changed for kids even in that time period. Like society has changed, things are different. What are some of the things you've observed over the years, just about the impact of the experience of students in the classroom?
I think one of the biggest things is I have more kids now that leave our class and want to go into the trades, which
Mm,
is really cool. They just didn't have that experience before. They weren't having the opportunity to even see what that was about. But I think consistently, and I know kids have changed, culture has changed a little bit. Throw COVID in there for fun, uh, but we've been really consistent, and we have more fun than anybody. And that's the kids are excited to come to class. I've actually heard kids say, like, "This is why I come to school." I'm like, "Are you sure? Because lunch is
wow.
pretty good too." You know. Um, but it is. I had two of my boys. They were former GIC students, and they were seniors. And we were working in the shop, and the shop door was open, and I see them come rolling up in their car, and they get out with Taco Bell, and I was like, "Are you guys ditching school to get Taco Bell?" And they're like, "Yep." I'm like, "Well, you could bring me some first of all." But I'm asking, like, "How are you guys doing in algebra 2?" Because they were not academic students. I mean, they did awesome in geometry and construction because it made sense because it could apply. They're hands-on kids. Um, and they're like, "We're getting A's in algebra 2." And I was like, "No, you're not." And they're like, "No, we are. We remember the stuff we learned in your class." And that's what I see with my kids that I hear over and
Yeah,
over. And my super duper smart kids, my ones that want to be engineers, say similar things that, they're in pre-calc or in calc, and they're like, "We know how to problem solve." The other kids that didn't take GIC, they sit there and wait for the teacher to tell them how to do it. We know how to talk to our teammates. We know who to look for and where to go to for help, and we figure it out so we don't need that help. And that's
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 fantastic.
powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like substantial life skills, regardless of like math knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, to figure it out. But is my kids all the time say, like, "Oh man, I always tell my friends they're in regular geometry, we're having way more fun than they are." We're like, "Heck yeah." And our
True.
test scores are kicking their butts. So that's good
Yeah,
too.
all never hurts. Um, and
Yes.
well, so talk, that's actually a good segue, maybe. Can you talk just a little bit about, because obviously there's the curriculum of the classes and the contextualized math and CTE lessons, or math and, business applications or whatever. But another large component of the programs that is, I think, fairly unique are the perspectives and training on how to establish like classroom dynamics and classroom culture, both for the students and then with the team teaching dynamics between teaching partners. Some of those things are fairly unusual. So can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about your experience of some of those? I guess you call it like the extracurricular aspects of the
Yeah.
program, and just your experience of that, or your perception of how that, what impact that has had on, the overall success of your classes.
Yeah. Um, it is so important. And I've done it well and I've done it poorly as far as putting emphasis on the team building aspect and building the proper culture, because you can't just throw kids in groups and think they're going to know how to communicate well and listen well and work together. The activities, that come from the trainings are awesome, but I'm constantly saying to the kids, like, I need leaders, but I also need you to listen to each other because leaders listen too, and teaching them how to hear each other, um, and working with a partner. It's like being married. I mean, it really is. Some days are better than others. You need to learn how to fold your partner's socks, how they like that. What's going to work, what your dynamic's going to be. I've had the same teaching partner for AMPED for all 4 years, and I know how to fold his socks. Like we
Yeah,
can we can feed off each other and fill in, when we need to, and we know when to jump in. He'll jump in the middle, and I'm talking about math, like this is a project to work on. Did you see, the math that we're using there? And vice versa. When he's talking about a project, I can be like, "Hey, you're doing math, not just the fun stuff with Mr. Warner." Yep. And um, but in GIC, gosh, I've had 4 teaching partners. Um, my current partner and my first teaching partner, I have loved with all of my heart. We just jive, like
yeah,
and they're 2 very different people, but our personalities and our teaching styles work out well. And I've also had teaching partners that I didn't get along with. And it was really hard, and it was reflected in how our students performed. And that probably is what drove me the most bonkers, is we
Hmm.
weren't at our best. And so we weren't able to give our best to our students. Um, but it's a constant, it's a relationship. It's something that needs work too. And I think, for teachers going into this, having a good teaching partner with an open mind is really important, but it's also really good to make sure that you are respectful of, their boundaries, their teaching styles, you know, um, just how they feel about the teaching interaction. I'm totally good with my teaching partner interrupting me in the middle of teaching math to be like, yeah, well, if you were a builder, you do it like this. Like I love that. And some people wouldn't, and it's really good to establish that, beforehand as well. Just being intentional about the culture you're creating and the relationships you're creating is really important to finding success.
Yeah, definitely. And from the student side also, there's a lot of emphasis placed on, you already kind of talked a little bit about some of those leadership skills, communication skills, interpersonal skills, even the
Hmm.
way the classroom time blocks are structured and the way the kids have to spend their time, where it's not so aggressively individual, but it's very corporate and interactive. Do you see similar, is that kind of thing reflected in other spaces in their schedule throughout the day or the week, or are your classes typically one of the main places that puts the emphasis on that kind of way of being in class, if that makes sense?
Yeah, we are pretty unique in what we do. And I know other teachers in our school will do group activities or group projects. And I think it's really interesting because my kids have gone through this. Uh, Kids that have been in geometry and construction, it doesn't matter if it's in science or English or social studies, they'll still group up together to do projects in other subject areas because
Hmm.
they know how to work it. And I don't know if other teachers, like I've had teachers say to me like, "Oh, we had those kids, you had those kids in GIC, and I see how they work together in our class because it becomes part of their culture."
Yeah.
And I have some of my students who've come back too and said like, "I don't know how I'm going to do this in algebra 2. Like, we're supposed to work by ourselves. Like, we should be collaborating." Like they've
Right.
believed in it too, and agree with it.
Yeah. And it's such a phenomenal, again, it's that skill set preparation, real world training, job training components that are so effective, like really outside of math or any other, like it's not a subject related thing. Those are just
Right.
incredibly useful, like adulting skills that many,
It is.
many
I've
adults
had
don't learn.
Yeah, yeah. I've had a handful of students come back, after they've graduated. They were in our class in 10th grade. Be like, "Can I talk to your students?" Like, heck yeah. Like
Hmm.
one of my boys is, he was at the tail end of studying to be a pilot. One is a builder, and they just really wanted to come back and tell, my current students the stuff like communicating, working with a team, being able to work through stress and frustration. Like it's okay to feel those things, and work through it. I just didn't come back last year at Christmas time. He's working at the US Embassy in Mongolia,
Oh,
and
geez.
he's like, yeah, I know. And he's like, oh my gosh, the stuff I learned in GIC. He's like, I'm not doing anything with math. He's like, but the stuff I learned in GIC is helping me be successful in my career now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
It's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Awesome. Um, and also, I'd like to ask you a little bit about whether or not have you had much experience of the wider community, like feedback from parents or sort of outside classroom communities engaging with things or tracking or tuning in, or I know some curriculums or some schools and some programs really end up developing strong like relationships with the what community for volunteering or
Yeah.
donations or different things just because of the nature of the program. It seems
Mhm.
to invite a higher level of like, oh, I see what's going on, and maybe as a parent or something I can even engage with that, or I get excited about it. Have you had some similar experience to that, or?
Yeah, yeah, it's really funny because a lot of parents of kids who have gone through our program, like I see them at the grocery store and I'm probably going to get a hug.
Yeah.
It's like this
Mhm.
has been the best thing since sliced bread, um, because they see what good it's done, for their student. We have good community partnerships. We have an awesome outfitter in town. It's the only outfitters in the Sioux, and they have their branches in a ton of community uplifting kind of things, and they are always coming to us, like, how can we involve you and your students in this to make our community a better place, to help our kids, grow their pride in where they live. We have a Facebook page too, and that's where it's fun to see when we're posting what's going on in class and what we're doing. The parents, tuning in and giving thumbs up, and just the reposting. Like we put on there
Yeah.
that we're looking to build greenhouses this year. We need some customers, and the parents that are then like spreading it out to the world,
Yeah.
to help us out. And it's cool too. We've done a couple of like the wooden trains for kids' playgrounds around town, and just the pride that the kids have in that. They're like, I drove by Rotary Park and I saw my train, like kids were playing on it, that kind of stuff. And I do get that feedback from parents too, that like my kid
Yeah.
built that.
Yeah.
And
It's
yeah,
really
we
unique.
definitely, yeah, and making those community connections is so important.
Yeah. That's awesome. Um, Last question I had for you was obviously because the nature of the curriculums is a little different, both in terms of the way the classrooms are organized and certainly in terms of the way the schedules are organized. Do you have any perspectives or maybe advice for newer teachers on how to connect well with your school administration and coordinate or work with, school
Mhm.
admin or other teachers, or like you're in a larger environment. It's not just you by
Yep.
yourself, and there are factors there, and some of the things you are trying to do maybe are a little bit different or unusual. So, what's been some of your experience of that relationship? And if you have any like perspective or advice on some of the ways that you've learned to work at that, or helped improve outcomes along the way,
Yeah.
that would be great to hear as well.
Yeah, we were really intentional, like the videos the promotional videos, that you get with the curriculum, showing those to our superintendent, our principal, to the whatever the board is that approves new classes, and especially like our counselors, the other teachers in the math department, so they could speak to it at the same level, that they knew what they were talking about, what we were trying to do with the kids.
Mm.
We're very intentional about our recruiting too. Like I make sure that I'm in Algebra 1 classes or the eighth grade math classes 2 weeks before the counselors are there to schedule. So I can let the kids know that this is what this looks like. This is an opportunity for you to apply to be in these classes. And then like when we make our t-shirts, gosh, for our first probably 6 or 7 years, I made sure that the right people got t-shirts from us, and there were, thank yous on the back. We have on the back, our partners in success,
Mhm.
and making sure that our CTE director and our superintendent and anybody on staff that wanted a t-shirt was going to get one. And doing projects too. Like I'll throw it out to the staff. Um, and it's been a cool evolution because at first it was like, oh, you're doing this, whatever,
Mhm.
from some of my coworkers, to like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing ever. Like this kid and this kid and this kid are in my class this year. They need to be with you next year because they would be so successful,
Yeah.
and just that excitement. But at first it was like, and I don't know if it was a little bit of like fear of the unknown.
Sure.
Um, but it was something different. It wasn't traditional. Um, and so it was like, yeah.
Wait and see.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we did to our administrators, we had to prove ourselves a little bit. In our first couple of years, when we got done at the end of the year, we would bring a few students and pictures of our projects to board meetings to show the board members,
Mm.
what this class that they approved was doing, and how it was interacting with the greater community and what it was doing for our school community. And then I had a couple of board members whose kids were in our class, and then we were in business.
Yeah, that sealed it.
Yep. Yep.
That's great. No, it's some really good, I think, good advice in there about just being very, thoughtful and intentional, and I mean, letting the outcomes speak for themselves, but making sure that the opportunities are there for people to track with what's happening,
Mm.
and being proactive is, I think that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we like to create our own hype a little bit.
Yeah, no, but it's good to think. I mean, you have to kind of think about it, because it's, especially if you're at the earlier phases, maybe it's your first year or second year, getting started. Those are some good things to think about for sure.
Yeah.
Um, you've already mentioned a couple, but last question I'll ask you, because I like to hear these. I think these are really fun. If you have any other just specific student stories that stand out in your mind from your experience of like specific interactions with kids that have had a certain kind of experience of the programs that really stand out to you or meant a lot to you, or kind of served as a good example of what some of the outcomes that are possible with these programs are?
Yeah, I ran into my student Dawson, and he was in our class in 10th grade, and it was probably 2 years after he graduated. He was working at Dunham's, and I was buying sneakers, and he's like, Miss Arbic, I just have to tell you, if I hadn't taken geometry and construction, I probably wouldn't have graduated from high school. And I was
Mm.
like, it's kind of a big thing, Dawson. Like, do you really mean that? And he's like, no, seriously. He's like, I had no confidence. I didn't believe in myself. I didn't think I could learn. He's like, that class really changed how I thought about myself and what I could
Wow.
do. Yeah. And I was like, holy crap. Like,
Yeah,
that's sweet.
that's
You
great.
know?
Oh man.
Yeah. I think about my first year kids too. Because I had a group of kids that were really high flyers. And I feel like they took geometry and construction. The first year was offered as kind of like it was risky behavior.
Hmm.
And every day they'd be like, "Are you sure you're teaching us the stuff we need to prepare for the future? Like, we're gonna be taking like pre-calc and calc one. Like, we got big stuff we're gonna do. Are you sure you're teaching us this stuff to get us ready?" And every day I'd be like, "I have no idea. Like, I've never done this before, but I'm working really hard. I'm trying my best, so I hope so." And those are kids, especially that first couple of years, that I kept in touch with, as
Hmm.
they moved through. And they were the ones that probably gave me the most detailed feedback, like, oh my gosh, this is so different than what our classmates are doing. Like, we have all of these problem solving skills and resiliency that our peers don't have. That's
Yeah.
my one guy said. He said, we're smart. It doesn't matter who our teacher is. We're going to learn the material. He said, but we learned the other stuff that makes us be more successful,
Mm.
than people that will just struggle and give up. And
Wow.
it's stuff like that. Yeah. I've had a handful of kids that have said, like, I would have dropped out, or I wouldn't have made it through, without this. And it's not what we're teaching, it's the community, it's the
Sure.
involvement, it's that sense of belonging. I did
Yeah.
have near we built a shed for our history teacher. And so I gave him a t-shirt, and he wore it to school one day, and my kids came to class and they're like, "Why is Mr. Anderson wearing one of our t-shirts?" And I was like,
Who
"Well,
did you steal it
I
from?
gave him one. Yeah, we built a shed for him." He's like, "He's not in the family. This is our family. He's not in the family." Like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, like we had such a sense of community that, like, yeah, they were going to beat him up and take the shirt back.
Probably don't do that.
Yeah, nope.
That's funny
Yeah,
though. Well, that's
but
wonderful.
yeah,
Yeah.
is that good? Is that
Yeah, that's those kinds of stories. Again, there's one thing to look at like numbers on a PowerPoint or something, but to actually hear the real stories of one of the things that I've heard most consistently as I've been doing some of these interviews is like both high achieving kids that want to be challenged, they really love the program and they get a lot out of it. And then
Mhm.
struggling kids who maybe don't traditionally fit the mold. Maybe their learning styles are really different. Maybe they need something different than a traditional classroom structure is going to give them. They really come alive, and it hits. It's like it's amazing to me that it is able to sort of serve both of those needs and desires at the same time,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
just work.
it's awesome. Our curriculum director actually just at our last staff meeting asked me, "Becky, who do you teach in your class?" I was like, "I teach my students." And she's like, "No, do you focus on the higher achievers or the lower achievers?" I was like, "No, I teach my students." And she says, "No, really." And I was like, "We're gonna fight, honey,
Yeah.
because you can't do that." And this, you're exactly right. This hits the high kids, the low kids, the middle kids. Um, just watching my kids that have never had success in school thrive, and it's usually starting in the shop, right? Or they
Hmm.
understand a story problem because it's not how they've looked at it before. Watching that confidence carry over is so powerful.
Yeah,
You know, yeah,
that's fabulous.
yeah.
Well, those were all the questions that I had for you. Thank you. This has been great. A great window into everything that's sort of
Awesome.
possible with these programs. So thank you so much for making time for it.
You're welcome. Have a great evening.